We all have dreams, but dreams by their very nature can be difficult to achieve. That's where Access Credit Union comes in. Whether it's going to college, owning a car, or building your dream home, your local credit union can help you to fulfill your dreams. Access Credit Union, funding dreams for over 50 years.
Close your eyes and pull like a dog.
And a new Irish record for Phil Healy, 22.99.
Christy Cooney hands over the Sam Maguire Cup to Graham Canty, Cork All Ireland champions for the 7th time ever.
Hello and welcome to the Star Sport Podcast. My name is Jack McCarran of the Southern Star, and I'm joined as always by Star Sport editor Kieran McCarthy. Before we kick things off, I'd just like to give a gentle reminder to our listeners and viewers to please rate, review and subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify and YouTube. The Star Sport Podcast is brought to you by Access Credit Union. Access Credit Union, funding dreams for over 50 years. On this week's podcast, we're dealing with the fallout from Killarney on Sunday and the record-breaking loss suffered by the Cork footballers at the hands of Kerry at Fitzgerald Stadium. In a few moments, we'll be joined by ex-Cork footballers Micheál, Haulie O'Sullivan and Diarmuid Duggan to try to make sense of everything that went awry for Ronan McCarthy's men in the Munster final. Later in the week, we'll have two more bonus Olympic podcasts as we gear up for the business end of the rowing regatta and Phil Healy's first appearance at the games. So keep an eye out for those on Wednesday and Thursday. And Kieran, before we jump into the football action, I just want to bring your attention to something. Obviously, we've been criticised for praising ourselves on occasion, but I just wanted to bring everyone's attention to some praise we received from the lads at Second Captains for our special Olympic magazine last week.
We're going to chat to Kieran McCarthy, who wrote something in the water how Skibbereen Rowing Club conquered the world. Kieran's also sports editor of the Southern Star newspaper, and they've gone big this week, Murph. Big.
It's actually unbelievable. Because they've Phil Healy as well from West Cork. So West Cork have 7 competitors in the Olympics this year.
Yeah.
Which
plus Dominic Casey is the coach.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of just it blows my mind a little, you know. And I just think it's so amazing that in a small local paper like the Southern Star has the chance to celebrate 7 Olympians plus Dominic Casey in an edition of their paper 2 days before the Tokyo Olympics are taking over Tokyo, and this is in the Southern Star, and they have every right to say that they're taking over Tokyo.
Bloody right.
I think it's just absolutely amazing. So I'm super excited to talk to Kieran a little later on, because you know, there are a lot of local newspapers out there and a lot of local newspaper supplements about Munster finals and Ulster finals and All Ireland finals and stuff like that. But I mean, this is the Olympics, you know. This is the Olympics, and that is an unbelievable achievement.
It's very cool. Yeah, Kieran's going to be on with the editor of the Journal.ie and Olympics superfan Sinead O'Carroll.
Okay, Kieran, that's enough positivity for one episode, because what we witnessed on Sunday was the worst loss for the Cork footballers against their own old rivals Kerry on record. So after West Cork sports fans had experienced the highest of highs in the early hours of Saturday morning, with their rowing heroes stealing the headlines in Tokyo, there was a serious wake-up call 24 hours later when Kerry put Cork to the sword on a scoreline of 4-22-19. You were there. What was your overall reaction to the game?
My first reaction is at least West Cork has the rowing, so that'll bring our spirits back up. But it was a horrific day at the office for the Cork footballers, and it's just a manner of the collapse, Jack, because Cork led 6-4 points just after the first half water break, and they were motoring along quite nicely, and they were causing Kerry problems. And fair enough, Kerry had missed a few goal chances that would have changed the complexion of the game very early on. But the collapse from just after that first half water break to the end of the game is, I think Kerry outscored Cork 4-18 to 3 points, which is, I think, horrific is an apt word. Like, it was embarrassing in the end. A 22-point defeat to your closest neighbour, your biggest rival in their own backyard, and Kerry won pulling up in the end as well. So, as encouraging as the opening quarter was for Cork, the next 3 quarters, I think it really showed where this Cork football team is right now. I think it was a very harsh lesson for Cork to get. It's worth remembering too that these teams I'm not making excuses here, but they're in very different trajectories. This is a Kerry team that's billed as the only side that can stop the Dubs. So this is a Kerry team on the rise, and they're a really, really, really good team.
Okay. I take that point on board about the teams being on very different trajectories, and I know Haulie and Diarmuid are going to go into that in a little more detail, but if we could just be shock jocks for a second, because I think I'm going to speak for a lot of Cork football fans when I say that team is Cork. It's not Louth, it's not Monaghan, it's not Cavan. It's one of the great aristocrats of football in this country, especially when it comes to taking on their old rivals, the Kingdom. So is there not an element of, as you said, it was horrific, and there should be no room for excuses because Kerry are great. No one from Cork wants to hear that Kerry are great. They want to hear why Cork were beaten so soundly. And I think, just to kind of give the alternative view, that saying that, this Cork team is on an upward trajectory, just won't cut it for a lot of Cork fans. So just to play the shock, go on.
But the reality is, Jack, this Cork team isn't a Division 1 team. They haven't been a Division 1 team in years. This Cork team was playing in Division 3 last year. Like, that was their level back in 2020. So when I say about teams and different trajectories, it's basically teams at different levels. And we saw a huge gap between Kerry and Cork the last day. And that's the same gap that's between Dublin and Cork and the other big teams, and where this Cork football team is right now, because Cork are a couple of tiers below. And that is the reality. I know Cork fans want Cork to challenge for the big titles and all the big honours. And of course, all Cork people want that. But the reality is, and we saw it the last day, that Cork are a long distance from that right now. You'll see quite soon.
You mentioned there was an element of Kerry almost winning, pulling up, and there was the feeling of that. I'm not sure if you're familiar with it, but you know that Simpsons meme when teams are hammering the other and it's stop, they're already dead. It's almost like the Kerry players had some sympathy for what they were putting their counterparts through.
Sympathy is probably the wrong word, but I just felt in that last quarter.
Empathy then.
Yeah, Kerry were running through and they just popped over points, kind of. I know Kerry fans would say they'd love to see a rootless streak and just get more goals, kind of hammer more nails in the Cork coffin. But it just seemed to me towards the end like Kerry emptied their bench. They ran their bench and they were still tagging on points. Like, Cork were beating Dockett by then, like the game was well over. And that's a game that's going to hurt those Cork footballers, hurt the management team, and hurt the fans. Like, fans have waited so long to get to a football game. 2,500 fans were left in there, Fitzgerald Stadium last Sunday. They had their golden tickets. Yet you could see some Cork fans heading for the exits kind of midway through the...
Yeah, I was taking notes, Kieran, and while I was watching the game, just so I'd have something to say when we recorded this on Tuesday. And the first half, I've nearly filled a copy with positives about the Cork performance. But in my second half notes, literally the only thing I've written down is Cork fans leaving after 55 minutes. And I think that sums up what had happened in that second and third quarter, as you mentioned.
And if we're looking too for, I suppose, the true level of this Cork team, and we touched it after the semi-final win against Limerick, where that first half of the Gaelic ground was dreadful. It was a really poor game of football, and that was Cork, a Division 2 team, up against Limerick, a Division 3 team. And I think the hope was that Cork could raise their game to give Kerry, a Division 1 team, a better game last Sunday, but the reality turned out much different. So I know there'll be knee-jerk reactions here, and obviously Cork fans will be hurt and will be stung. Of course, you would be losing to your biggest rival and getting your arse spanked on national TV. It's never a good place to be. But the reality is that this Cork football team is miles away from being a contender right now. It's going to take time to get to any level where they can challenge the likes of the Dublins, the Kerrys, even the Mayos, and Tyrones. They're all operating at a level above this Cork football team right now. So it's going to take a bit of time to get up there. But what a painful way to be taught that lesson. There's for the underage success that has happened over the last few years and is continuing to happen, those players you hope will come through at some point, and they need to be brought through, and that's so important. But that's right now, for Cork fans listen to this, that's scant consolation, because we're not talking about an instant remedy here. You're talking about and I know there's a Cork football plan out there, this 5-year plan. I don't know, it'll be 2 or 3 years into it already, but this Cork aren't any closer to being where they want to be.
I don't think the headline for year 3 of that 5-year plan was record a record loss against our nearest rivals. But look, there were some positives, which I'm sure you'll touch on with Haulie and Diarmuid. There was that opening 15 minutes. There was that spectacular goal by Brian Hurley and 2 cracking points from Micheál Hurley. So for a few minutes...
Sean Meehan, we have to mention Sean Meehan, because the Kishke man was terrific. The whole David Clifford scoreless from play for the entire game was incredible, and he is the only Cork footballer, I think, to come out of Killarney with a, I suppose, a positive player rating. Really, Brian Hurley was dangerous, all right, in the first 50 minutes before.
I'd give Brian Hurley a positive rating as well, just for that goal alone. That's everything that's good about Brian Hurley. It's what Cork fans love about him. He has that spectacular streak in him when it's going well. So just for that goal alone, you'd have to give him some credit.
And he roasted Jason Foley in the
they had to move him off him.
So he did quite well. But then the Kerry management were so clever in the sideline. They made the right calls at the right times. Even how they pressed Micheál Martin's kickouts was just impressive. And Cork were left floundering and just couldn't see any plan B, C's or D's there. And it's an afternoon to forget, but it's an afternoon that can't be forgotten either, because big lessons need to be learned from this, and it'll be interesting to see what the next couple of weeks and months will bring. I think what kind of hurts too in this year's championship, there's no back door for these Cork footballers. They'll have to stew in this loss for an entire winter. If you think back to last winter, Cork beat Kerry, but then very disappointing, they lost to Tipperary, and you had to wait a couple of months before they got back in action again. But this will be an even longer wait. We're still in July, so you're talking 6 or 7 months before they even play the league next year. And this loss will be used as a stick to beat them with for some time to come. So you'd hope it'll put a bit of hunger and fire in the belly for next year. But we just have to wait and see. And at least they'll go back to their clubs, and the club scene will kick on, and they get back into that kind of familiar environment. But there can't be any forgetting and sugarcoating what happened in Killarney either.
Okay, well, let's not waste any more time, and let's hear now from 2 men who really know what they're talking about when it comes to the future of Cork football, and that's Micheál, Haulie O'Sullivan and Diarmuid Duggan.
We're joined now on the Star Sport podcast by 2 former Cork footballers, Haulie O'Sullivan and Diarmuid Duggan. I suppose to pick the bones over last Sunday's Munster final in Killarney. It was a day to forget for Cork, a record 22-point loss to the old enemy. Haulie, I'll come to you first. What's your reaction now a couple of days on?
Well, look, it was very difficult as an ex-player, and having been there to watch the second 2/3 of the game more than anything else. We had great hope from the first 15 minutes. But look, at no matter what level, if you've been in charge of a team, we've all had days like this, and it's how Cork are going to react, and how you dust yourself down, and how you learn from this, and how you improve. Often you have to hit rock bottom and go to the bottom of the barrel to develop that mental strength and that drive, to bring yourself back and start being successful, and learn, what it's actually going to take to be successful. And the reaction will be key. Hopefully all the players will hang on, and the game will be analysed by the group themselves and by the management. And we'll go 1 or 2 ways for you. You can either lie down and take it, or you can come back, redoubling your effort next year with mental strength developed, and hopefully have another real go at them next year.
Yeah, but like we know, it turned out pretty nasty in the end. Kerry just ran away with it, 4-22 to 1-9. But let's look at that opening quarter first, because there was some hope there. Well, there was more than some hope for Cork. At one point, Cork led by 5 points, 1-6 to 0-4. I think Brian Hurley got 1-1-1-2 in that period. Micheál Hurley got 2 points, and Cork were causing Kerry problems, especially Brian Hurley. He was turning Jason Foley inside out. And then at the opposite end, the Cork defence was holding their own, against an all-star Kerry cast. So what did Cork do right in that first quarter?
I think they brought huge energy to the game again, which is what we kind of said they needed to bring. Unfortunately, they didn't maintain it. But, they started, as you said, with a massive fight, massive energy, great running. They were running from defence. There were support runners. And they definitely had, Kerry at 6 and 7s. But I suppose, after the first quarter, normal service almost resumed at that point because, Kerry just kind of built their way into the game. Cork had a few stray passes that went stray. And then on the Kerry seemed to turn them over in the break. Then, and all of a sudden, Kerry found themselves back in the game without having to do a whole lot, really. And I think Cork were never really going to maintain it. They had huge energy. And, on a hot day down in Killarney, they were never going to maintain that. As it turned out, that's what happened,
And Haulie, that second quarter was when the wheels started to come off, because I think Brian Hurley pointed just after the water break, and that pushed Cork 1-6 to 4 points up. But then Kerry just took over. What happened in that second quarter that allowed Kerry to take such control and dominate that game so much?
Well, I think Kerry would say themselves that they were very sloppy in the first quarter as well. Cork had numerous turnovers and got scores from numerous turnovers. But, looking at the game, it was quite obvious that Kerry were trying to pressurise Martin, and it didn't come off in the first 15 minutes. But after the first water break, you could see they pushed 5 in and cut out the short option completely, made Micheál Martin go long. And Kerry, I think I counted on the stats after, I think Kerry won 13 long kickouts from Cork over the course of the 70 minutes. And look, if you can't win your own ball around the middle, you're in big trouble. And look, the flags were there during the league. When Cork were able to go short, we were able to build nicely. But when we were losing our long kickouts, we became under pressure. Cork went man to man, but then man to man is fine as long as the overlap isn't created. And Diarmuid Duggan there be a good man to speak about the overlap, because Island Rovers were experts at that. But when the overlap is created, man to man goes out the window to a degree, then, and you've got to take the most dangerous man. And that was, there were examples of that with the Begley goal, where all the Corkbacks tracked their own men and were too late getting to Begley before he got the shot off after running 70 metres. Another one was the Gavin White run that led to the Shani Shea goal. He burst through the middle. I know there were Cork defenders hanging off him, but no one got a decent tackle on him to stop. But, Kerry's energy levels rose. They had more physicality, more fieldy ability in the middle of the field. They cleaned us out in the middle third. We all know whether you're playing under 12 or whether you're playing inter-county senior football, you got to win your own ball in the middle of the field to create any kind of platform. And you might say, Cork had no plan B. If you can't win your own ball from your own kick-out, you can have 10 plans. None of them will work. So look, there's work to do there, and those flags were there during the league also. And when we came up against a better team of the quality that Kerry have, they were manifested even more.
Just on those kickouts for a second, Haulie, and you've written about them a fair bit during the National League in your column in the Star. When the Cork kickout was going so badly, and you're right there, Kerry really pressed up. You even saw the Kerry goalkeeper Shane Ryan was out around his own 45. They really pressed up on Cork. What could Martin or Cork have done different instead of knocking the ball long time after time?
Well, there's no problem knocking it long. Like, there weren't that many clean catches, but Kerry were killing us on the breaking ball as well. And I don't know, is that a physicality thing, or that Cork lost their, the impetus that they had in the first quarter, where we were winning all those breaking balls and getting short kickouts away quickly. Whatever it was, either Kerry were more physical than us and getting in before to get that breaking ball, or else, we just didn't have the size and the power around the middle to be able to compete with them. So look, once the ball is on the ground, it's 50-50. Moran had a couple of clean catches. Jack Barry had a couple of clean catches. Diarmuid O'Connor played well while he was there. But, there are questions to be asked, well, why weren't we getting on the breaking ball when it was on the ground? And that's a basic thing.
Just on that, Diarmuid, as well, Haulie mentioned there about Kerry's physicality, and Paddy Clifford actually mentioned it after in his TV interview when he picked up the Man of the Match award, that Peter Keane had told the Kerry players that they were physically fitter than Cork, and that would come true at some point. Do you think that the conditioning of the players that had an effect on a sweltering hot day? It was really hot in Killarney the last day, and that that better Kerry conditioning told in the end as well?
Yeah, I think you're right. But, you know, I think we can't go away from the fact that I think this Kerry 15 are much better than the Cork 15. And, you know, we can talk about fitness, we can talk about tactics and everything. But when it comes down to this, Kerry, as individuals, these 15 are probably the best in the country, really. You know, they mightn't have the best team. Dublin probably have the best team. But from an individual point of view, Kerry are just better. They're just better players than Cork. So, yeah, like it looked like conditioning played a factor. But, you know, when you're chasing a game on a hot day, 8 points, 9 points down, you know, the team that's ahead like always looks like they have more energy anyway, you know. So if the game was closer, you know, 2 or 3 points in it, then I'm sure, you know, Cork would have gotten an extra lift from that again, you know. But look, we can only go on what we saw, and it did appear that the Kerry's conditioning was better, you know, from a physical point of view, but also aerobically as well from a fitness point of view.
Just on that, Diarmuid, like obviously Kerry have quite a good team there. How many Cork footballers do you think would get in that Kerry 15?
Very little, being honest. You know, I'm sure there's a few would make their panel, but, you know, Meehan possibly on his performance, you know, Maguire would be thereabouts, Powter thereabouts, but, you know, none of them would be certainties on it. And it's no reflection on this Cork team. You know, Cork teams have taken big beatings from Kerry over the years. You know, even when I was involved in, we'll say, 04, 05, 06, we often took, you know, 12 and 13 point beatings from Kerry. And like, it was still the same nucleus of players that won All Ireland and 10 and dominated for 4 or 5 years, you know. So it's not a reflection on the character of the players or anything. It's just simply, I think, at the moment, Kerry have better players, and, you know, we can talk about tactics and everything, but I just think no matter what manager was there, you know, Kerry were probably always going to win this game unless there was a shock of some sort and that Cork got 4 or 5 goals or something. But going back to your question, very little probably at the moment, you know, and that would go for any other county around Ireland, you know, Dublin aside, you know, Kerry just have a very, very good team at the moment.
Haulie, we saw as well, I think, when Cork saw firsthand the level that they have to reach if they want to get into that conversation to be considered a contender for the big prizes. And I think it showed last Sunday there's quite a gap between the Dublin Kerrys, Mayo maybe, and the teams in the tiers below it. If we look at, let's say, the Cork attack for a second, like I said, 1-5, 1-6 early on, but in 3 points for the rest of the game. And Ronan McCarthy touched it afterwards. He felt Cork left chances behind him in the second quarter, that there was some bad decision making, some bad wides. So if you're looking at it from that point of view, in terms of wastefulness and rootlessness, Cork have a distance to travel there too to reach the Kerrys and the Dublins.
Yeah, there's no doubt. Like even from, and I on my column this year, I kind of mentioned it as well, even from my experience of being involved in school football there over the last, you know, dozen years with Clan. Playing Corny and coming across Kerry schools teams. Like, it's been obvious for the last 10 years that they have serious stuff coming through, and that manifested itself with All Ireland minor titles. And I know we have a plan in place, and Conor Coonan is overseeing that plan. But I think our development structure is just a little bit behind where Kerry is at the moment. They're further down the line. You know, they have players developing or developed that have reached their senior team. Whereas Cork are 4 or 5 years behind that. We have very good lads under 17, under 20. Whether they'll come through to senior remains to be seen. But they look to have the quality. So, like, the worst thing about it is a lot of these Kerry players that have come through are also very young players. You know, the likes of David Moran there and Tommy Walsh are the only guys that they have on the wrong side of 30, I'd say. So look, you'll be hoping that we can fast track some of those guys at under 17, under 20, the likes of, you know, I know Carbett's after picking up an injury, nobody looks a serious player, and there's a good full back there under 20 as well, Diarmuid Phelan, and, you know, there are two midfielders, Paddy Hayes' son, Brian Hayes, and the Cook young lad from Ballincollig look big athletic guys that could come through in the next 1 or 2 years. We badly need, you know, more big athletic guys in that middle eight that are able to compete with the top teams. You see Kerry have a lot of them, Dublin have a lot of big athletic guys. You know, the game has gone, you know, it has changed an awful lot. You know, you have to have the size now, you have to have the pace now, you have to have the power, you have to have the football ability, you know, and you have to have 7 or 8 guys out of your 15 like Kerry and Dublin have at the moment that are going to have that. With regard to our forwards, look, our forwards started very well when they were getting loads of ball. They looked very dangerous. You know, Kerry were a bit open at the back. But when the supply dried up, the likes of Brian Hurley and John On and Dan O'Deneen and these boys, you're just struggling for possession, and that's the same with any team. If your inside forwards aren't getting a good supply, you're not going to put the scores on the board. And I know Cork missed a bit, but you were under serious pressure as well at the time.
This is a nice, easy question for you, Diarmuid. But where does this Cork football team go from here? Like I said, it's a record championship loss to Kerry. Like, it's at a low ebb right now. The players obviously go back to their clubs, which is probably a good thing. They get back into with their friends, with their teammates, to get back playing club football and try and forget about this game for a while. But even looking ahead to next season, what do Cork have to do to bridge that gap? Is it, like Haulie said there, do Cork need those under-20s coming through faster, kind of get them, even though the likes of Brian Hartnett, Maurice Shanley, Meehan, they've all come through and they're all doing quite well, but do Cork need more of those young fellas coming through? And just fans need to be patient for a couple of years and let these lads find their feet at this level.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think there's no quick fix anyway in this. As I mentioned, over the years, Cork have taken big beatings, maybe not as big as this record win, of 22 points, but they've taken them. And out of all the counties in Ireland, I think Cork has the best chance of bouncing back from it. They have the population, they have the players, they have the tradition. So of all counties, I think they're best placed for it. But there was a lot of call even the last few days, that Ronan McCarthy must go and change of management, all this kind of thing. But I think that's just merely scratching the surface. I think there's more to it than that. I think there's a couple of key things. I think the first thing is they need to get back playing Division 1 football, which is absolutely critical. So it must be a priority, whether it's for Ronan McCarthy next year or whether it's a new management. They must try and get back into Division 1 for the following season, because at the moment they're playing, lesser teams, the likes of, Down and different teams like that. And they might be winning these games against Westmeath, etc. But when it comes to the top end, Division 1 teams, they're in for a shock, really, because these teams are at a different level. So they have to get used to playing these teams, and any players coming through from under 20, etc., they need to be thrown straight in at that level and shown that this is the level that you need to get to, to compete for All Ireland and Munster titles. So I think that's the first thing anyway. Division 1 football is a priority. I think the second thing then is, Haulie mentioned that the underage success, which is it's been quite okay the last couple of years, minor titles, and we're always pushing Kerry close, who then go on to win All Ireland titles. So I think what Kerry do much better than us, I think, is that transition from under 20 to senior. And I just take it back to 2011. I don't know if you were at that game, Kieran. It was an under 21 Munster final. Kerry played Cork up in Páirc Uí Rinn, and the likes of Kieran Sheehan and Aidan Walsh were in the Cork team. And Cork won that evening by 22 points. Absolutely annihilated Kerry. So Kerry on their team that day had likes of Paul Gainey, James O'Donoghue, Jonathan Lyne. They had a couple more. Peter Crowley, I think, was on that team, etc. But Cork beat them by 22 points. But yet, within about 3 years, a lot of that Kerry under 21 team had All Ireland senior medals. So I think it's that transition from under 20 to seniors where Cork seem to be losing at the moment. So managers will come and go and these players seem to get lost, but I think there must be a real focus on the top 5 or 6 of any of these under 18 teams or under 20 teams, that they're, a hand is put around their shoulder and, they're told that you're the future Cork football. This is what you need to do, and build a nucleus of these guys. And it just shows that, sometimes Cork put a huge priority on All Ireland winning teams, but a team that might lose by 8 or 9 points, you might still have 4 or 5 excellent players on that team. So I think that's a huge priority, that we bridge that gap between under 20 level and senior level, which is a huge step, because at the moment Cork haven't been doing that. So I think they're the two things. And as I said, out of all the counties in Ireland, Cork has the ability to bounce back within 3-4 years. We've done it in the past. Back in 2003, when Larry's Tompkins' last game was involved, he lost to, I think, was it Limerick and Roscommon that year, teams who would have been Division 2 or Division 3 probably at the time. And yet within 7 years, they were All Ireland champions. And even in 8 and 09, they could have been All Ireland champions as well. So, it seems dark and it seems gloom at the moment, but I think once you put a kind of those couple of things in place, you prioritize those things, and I think Cork won't be too far away in a couple of years again. They have that ability to come back.
What are your thoughts, Haulie? How does Cork football bounce back from this?
I think patience is key. In the present squad, there is a nucleus of quality players. You have a nucleus of quality players, and like you mentioned, from the under 20 teams over the last couple of years, Micheál looks a class player, Daniel O'Mahony looks a class player, Mara Shanley did very well last year. We're not too bad on the side of the forwards, right? Or on the side of attacking. We probably need more around the middle. We need a big 10, a big 12. We need someone with Maguire. So we're not just looking at one area to put kickouts and, give us more scope with regard to winning longer kickouts further out the field and more physicality. And all those things are there. But like you said, and like Diarmuid said, Kerry was conditioned. You could, if you even look at take Gavin White as an example, he looked to me, let's say between last year and this year, or 2 years ago and this year, he was a slight lad who was pacey. Now he's after bulking up. He's extremely powerful. He's throwing lads out of his way. He's awake. He seems quicker in his pace than what he was. The same with the likes of even Paul Murphy. There was a small guy. Like Shani Shea and Clifford are the prime examples. Their conditioning for 22 and 23-year-olds is phenomenal. Now, I know there are exceptions, but, the right things were probably put in place for them to develop the way they did develop. And look, if you take Conor Corbett as an example, I know he's got injured now, the poor devil, and I wish him best luck in his recovery. But, even the way he's physically conditioned at the moment, at the age of 20, right now, he's even 19. He's a big, strong boy, in fairness, for his age, and he's absolutely what Cork need there at 10 or 12 as well. So look, I think Cork are doing a lot of the right things underage, but as Diarmuid said, we might have a few more long afternoons in Killarney before we'll see the benefit of all the sport that's been done under 17 and under 20. But I think we are going in the right direction. But patience and time, I think, is the key.
Haulie, as a former manager yourself, put yourself in Ronan McCarthy's shoes for a minute. He was asked about his future after the game, and understandably he didn't want to talk about that. But what's it like for him now this week and even the weeks going forward? What's going through his mind, kind of coming off the back of a defeat like that, and even looking to his future?
Yeah, sure. Look, it's very difficult, and look, I've managed teams, but at schools and at club level where you have taken those heavy beatings, and you've got a lot of criticism for it. But look, you've got to either decide: are you going to lie down, or are you going to kind of redouble your efforts and look at where you went wrong and try and come back again next year and give it another rattle and hope that the players will buy in again. But often, when you lose badly, it's the management team and the group that are associated with the management team that seem to take the blame. And often when you're on the other side of it, when you have a wonderful victory, the players get all the credit and the management don't get a whole pile of credit. So look, it's a difficult place to be when you're in charge of a team. It's thankless at times, But if you are involved, it is enjoyable to be involved with a team. But I think Ronan will take stock now for a while. He'll take his time, and there's more than him involved in this. He has a big backroom team who I'm sure he'll be consulting with, and obviously the player group. The player group, obviously, players have a big say with regard to the go forward momentum of any management team in the modern era. And he's 1 year left in his term. I suppose the county board will obviously be looking at his contract as well. So look, I'd be patient and let him take stock and take a few weeks over this to mull it over. But it's not often the best thing to. It's the easy thing to say often to just get rid of the manager. We're not the Premiership either, where we could just buy in more players and try and improve from there. But the knowledge base that management team would have built up now over the last 4 or 5 years that they've been there. When you bring in a new management, often that's last. But then if the under 20s go on to win the All Ireland, you'll hear the shouts on social media for Keith Ricken to be put straight in as senior manager. And, he's doing a wonderful job where he is. Would he want to go in there? That question is there to be answered.
Diarmuid, we can't chat in this podcast about the game without chatting about Sean Meehan. That man was incredible the last day. We spoke last week on the podcast about how can Cork keep David Clifford quiet, the bright white light of Gaelic football. But Meehan held him scoreless from play, and Clifford had one of his quietest days ever in a Kerry jersey and just got 1 point from from a free in the second half. Just a couple of words on Sean Meehan. Like, he's a man who left Killarney with his reputation enhanced.
Yeah, no, he's absolutely immense. And we actually spoke about him last year as well, Kieran, in the game the Cork won up in Páirc Uí Chaoimh. That day he was centre back and he was marking Sean O'Shea. Kept him very, very quiet, and Sean O'Shea is probably the best centre forward at the moment in the country. So, he had a different kind of job today. He was playing fullback, or the other day he was playing fullback on arguably the best forward, arguably the best inside forward any in the country, and they did an absolute brilliant job. He's one for the future. He's one for the present. He's one for the future, and I think he's somebody, maybe this is saying a lot of him, but in the mold of almost Graham Canty, that he's someone that you can mold a team around. Him, Powter, a few more guys like that. It's great to see he leads by example, and fair play to him, because he's still only a young man, but he's playing with the experience of a 28 or 29-year-old. So immense performance, and well done to Sean.
Fantasy football manager here for a second. Any players in the county, lads, that you'd like to see brought into the Cork panel? Any fellas that you've seen playing over the years who you think are good enough to be worth a shot, that could add something to the Cork panel going forward?
Well, I suppose if we had no hurling, we'd probably have a better football team.
Left to the chat to Kieran Kingston about that. If is it the likes of David Cahalan and fellas like that, do you think? Is it maybe his time is probably gone? But are there players out there that are good enough to be on this Cork senior football panel? Obviously, the management have scoured the county and they brought in who they consider to be the best. But are there any players that you think could be worth even a look at? Because I'm thinking in terms of size and physicality and stuff. Are there fellas out there that Cork need to look at?
Well, I suppose I said early on the year that I thought there was more in Tom Clancy from Clan. Like, he's still only the same age as John O'Rourke and those boys, and he's a big physical guy. Look, he'd have to commit and really train hard, but he definitely brings a bit of size and physicality. And if you take another example, like Sean O'Donoghue there, who plays cornerback on the hurling team, he captained Cork to an under-21 Munster title, I think about 3 or 4 years ago, if I'm right. I'd have to check that now again. But look, the likes of him and the physicality and pace that he has, you can see it in the hurling. There is obviously a last of the football. But look, that's been going on forever and a day in Cork football, where you have fellas that are hurlers that are also very good footballers and choose hurling. But I think with the whole development squad structure, they're not missing too many. You know what I mean? Like, they're not missing out on too many players. Obviously, players make the choice either maybe give up a few years earlier or go playing hurling. But I think even the late developers, they are being watched out for. There seems to be more of an emphasis now with our 17s and our 20s to try and the bigger physical pacier player. There seems to be more of them on the 17 and the 20 teams, and they're the type of player that we badly need at the moment.
And finally, Diarmuid, we've talked about here obviously a horrific day for this Cork football team, but patience is needed to bring these young fellas through. We're talking about the under-17s, under-20s, but patience is in short supply in fans. We're living in a day of instant messaging, instant coffee, instant everything. What would you say to the Cork fans out there that are just kind of like they're calling for people's heads and they want this happened and that happened, that they're not ready to be patient for this Cork team to enjoy success? What would you say to those fans?
Just be patient, because there's no other way around it. You don't come from losing to Kerry by 22 points to winning a Munster title or All Ireland the following year. You might win a Munster title because it's a one-off game, maybe. Generally, it's a one-off game, not always, but you might win a Munster title. But in general, you don't. And they are calling for Ronan McCarthy's head, and there's names being bandied about, as Micheál said, Keith Ricken, people even mentioning Jimmy McGuinness, all these kind of people, and I think even if you had Jimmy McGuinness, Jim Gavin and Mick Dwyer on the sideline, they wouldn't have made a difference the last day. Because I come back to the point again, Cork players at the moment, they're probably not at the level of Kerry. So, it's patience. I think it doesn't take too long to get there. It takes a number of years, and they can get there. But I think, as Micheál said, there are good players in that Cork panel. When you're looking in on a defeat like that, you wouldn't think so. But, I mean, we've been here before, even All-Ireland winning players have had defeats like that, and when you look at take games in isolation like that, they look like poor players, but they're not. They're much better than that, So I think if you can augment that a core nucleus of the team that is there with these new players coming through from maybe under 20 level, then within a couple of years you can start to close that gap. But I think, going back to your question again, it's patience. It has to be. This is not a quick, sticky plaster kind of job where you can bring in a manager and suddenly it'll all be perfectly rosy in 12 months. It's going to take 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, even 5 years, before we're down at the top table again, and playing the likes of Tyrone, Dublin, Kerry, all these teams back where we belong essentially, but it's definitely going to take time. You don't come from 22 points down to, suddenly winning All Irelands or competing in All Ireland finals.
I'll leave the final word to you, Haulie. Can Cork bridge that gap?
Well, look, we as Diarmuid said, we have been there in the past before, where this type of thing has happened, and we've taken heavy defeats, none to the extent of today. But look, we're a footballing county. These things always go in cycles. They said a number of years back, and even last year, that Dublin could go on and win 10 in a row. Now all of a sudden you even hear Kieran wheeling there and the Sunday game saying there are doubts. The teams are getting closer to them all of a sudden because they've lost the strong bench that they have with retirements. You saw their under-20s were beaten by Offaly the middle of last week. So is that, with all the coaching power and monetary power that they have, is that constant supply of good players going to be there for them even? So look, I think Cork are doing a lot of the right things with regard to development. I think we will come again. We're a big county, always a powerful football county and a proud football county. And I think there is a group there that can do an awful lot for Cork football in the next 4 or 5 years.
Great stuff, lads. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, I'm Fiona Kangataran and I'm an illustrator from Kinsale. During lockdown, wanting to keep myself busy and just having a mad year, I felt like I needed to do something different, and I actually went back and picked up an old hobby where it left off, and it was a passion of mine since I was a kid. It was drawing. I made personalised cards for each and every one of my friends, as each and every birthday and celebration and event that got cancelled, postponed, or just something that we couldn't meet up in person to celebrate. And I wanted it to mark something special, that not just that I remembered the date, but just that I see them and I love them and I care, and of course I miss them so much. And I think we're all going through that all at the same time. And so when I shared those images online, it resonated with so many people, and I didn't realize the positive impact that it would have. And it was really powerful, and it was this immediate validation that I was doing something right, that this was a sign of where I should be taking my own career. And then when Access Credit Union approached me about their Funding Dreams campaign, it just felt like fate, and they wanted their community to be represented. They wanted people to be seen, and they wanted to bring people together, and that's what the credit union does. And I just couldn't be prouder to be a part of this project, and at the same time it's actually made my dream come true of being a paid illustrator. So I couldn't be more grateful that it's going in this direction.
Kieran, before we wrap things up on this edition of the Star Sport podcast, I just want to quickly mention that we will have 2 more podcasts out later in the week. One of those will be with Joan Healy, sister to Phil, and Kieran spoke to Joan in depth about Phil's 3 events at the Olympics and what her ambitions are for the overall games. We're also going to be reflecting on the Tokyo Regatta, as it's now known, after Paul's quotes in a pre-Olympics press conference. So we'll reflect on the performance of all the Skibbereen rowers at the Olympics. So that will be available later this week as well. Hopefully we'll have a few medals to celebrate. But Kieran, the Southern Star sports section rolls on. There's another edition this Thursday. So what can readers look forward to when they pick it up?
There's something for everyone, as usual. Of course, the Olympics will get pride of place with Phil Healy kicking off our Olympics on Friday. And of course, the rowers are doing great things in Tokyo as we speak. Obviously, too, there's fallout from Cork's Munster final loss to Kerry. So check it out to read Haulie O'Sullivan's column, The Inside Track, where he gives his thoughts where it all went wrong for the Cork footballers. On a positive note for Cork football, the Cork under-20s won the Munster title last week, and it was a Newcestown man, David Buckley, who was man of the match. He kicked 10 points as Cork beat Tipperary, and those Cork under-20s are out against Offaly in an All-Ireland semi-final this weekend. We also have news of the Cork ladies football team, the Cork Camogie team, the Cork hurlers as well. The Cork hurlers will play Dublin this weekend. Keeping it a bit more local, we have a great interview with Johnny Kelly, Dunmanway Town's Beamish Cup winning captain, who scored the winning goal 2 minutes from time recently at Turner's Cross. So Ger McCarthy caught up with Johnny Kelly. And Jack, he's only 25 years of age, but Johnny has won 4 Beamish Cups already. He's racking up quite a collection there. So 4 Beamish Cups with 2 different teams, and his last one was as captain with the winning goal 2 minutes from time. So if you want
for what it's worth, I'm 30 years old. I've never even won a round of the Beamish Cup. Never mind 4 medals. So yeah, congratulations to Johnny Kelly.
So that's where we're picking up. And we also have a very interesting piece about an athlete called Tom Wood, who I'd never heard of before, but he is the original Inniskeen athletics trailblazer. This is a very good piece by Tom Lyons, who tells the story of Tom Wood, who 130 years ago was twice crowned the All-Ireland athletics champion. So we've the Ballanine bullet from that neck of the woods now, but she's continuing the legacy that was set by Tom Wood 130 years ago. So it's a really interesting piece. It goes back to Tom Wood and his athletics career. And this West Cork man, was the best in the business when it came to Irish athletics at the time. So it's well worth reading this, and it's very timely too, considering that Phil Healy will be in action later in the week. And obviously we've the usual stuff, the road bowling, the schoolboy soccer, the motorsport and all that. So as you can see, Jack, it's packed.
Absolutely. Well, I look forward to reading that. And do we have a nickname for Tom Wood yet? The Enniskeen Energizer, right, I'm drawing blanks. Come on, you're the sports editor. We have the Ballanine bullet. Now we need the Enniskeen.
We've terrific Tom.
Terrific Tom. Okay, yeah.
It's just doesn't. As I can come up with. No, we'll have to get something.
That just doesn't take into account where he's from. So we're going to have to come back to that one. So watch this space. If anyone has a good name we could give to Tom Wood, the Enniskeen something or other. He's a very fast man. So get in contact. sport@southernstar.ie. Anyway, thanks for listening to the Star Sport podcast. We'll be back at the same time next week with a regular one, but as I said, 2 more Olympic podcasts to come later in the week. If you enjoy these shows, please make sure to rate, review and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. Slán Tamil.